Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grinwald. In this episode, I am just so happy to have Scott Chesney back with me again as my special guest co-host. Scott and I interview Quentin Williams. Quentin is known by his friends as Q. Q started his career as a bouncer and paralegal. In his childhood, he lived on welfare for many years with his mom, but with determination and a mentor that helped to steer his career path, Q became an attorney, an advocate, author, educator, sought-after speaker, and thought leader who draws on his personal history as a former FBI agent, federal prosecutor, and also has held senior positions with the NFL, Jacksonville Jaguars, and the NBA. Truly incredible. He is now the founder and CEO of Dedication to Community, D2C, the national nonprofit he established in 2012. Q's career in law, professional sports, and leadership consulting culminates in D2C, delivering skills-building workshops and ongoing forums to improve understanding and build relationships in communities through healing, reconciliation, and unity. So needed. He is the proud father of a son and daughter and credits his firstborn as the inspiration for writing the survival guide, How Not to Get Killed by the Police. This was an incredible conversation, and I hope you learned as much as I did listening to Q's journey. Please subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel and download it on all streaming sites. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. That is Today is the Day LIVEIT. Have a great week, everyone. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Today is the Day Changemakers. Thank you so much for watching. I am here today with two amazing people, but first I want to introduce my special guest co-host, Scott Chesney. Hi, Scott. How are you?
Hey, Jody. Hey, Q. How are you guys?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm so glad Scott's joining me again as a special guest co-host. If you missed it, go back because Scott and I had a conversation where I interviewed him. Scott is known as the Commander in Change. He is a coach, motivational speaker, and truly a change maker. He's presented to large audiences on multiple topics. So please go to scottchesney.com and find out more about the incredible work that he does and also the documentary that he has made about his life called Ride the Wave. So Scott, great to have you back again. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Always a joy to work with you, Jody.
Thank you, Scott. And then Quentin Williams, how are you? Thank you so much for being our special guest today.
I'm doing really well, Jody. Thank you. And Scott, great to see you.
So before we get into this conversation, I want to just give our audience a little background about you. So I'm going to read from your bio a little bit. Quentin Williams is the founder and CEO of Dedication to Community, D2C, the national nonprofit he established in 2012. Quentin's career in law, professional sports, and leadership consulting culminates in D2C, which delivers skills building, workshops, and ongoing forums to improve understanding and build relationships in communities through healing, reconciliation, and unity. He's an advocate, an attorney, and an author educator. Quentin is sought after as a speaker and thought leader who draws on personal history as a former FBI agent, a federal prosecutor, and in senior positions with the National Football League, the Jacksonville Jaguars, I can't say Jaguars today, and National Basketball Association. He's the proud father of a son and daughter and credits his firstborn as the inspiration for writing the survival guide, How Not to Get Killed by the Police. The Boston Globe said in 2020, he offers precisely the type of proactive, solution-oriented framework these turbulent times demand. Quentin, I can't tell you how happy we are to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here. So thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
Absolutely. And you know, there's so much to unpack in what an incredible journey you've been on in your career. So I kind of want to go backwards a little bit, right? Because you didn't just get here today. You've gone through a lot and you have a great background. So share with me, we have something in common. I believe you're from New York, right? You grew up in New York?
Yes, I'm a New Yorker. I was born on the island of St. Thomas, but I grew up in New York.
Yeah, and I grew up in Brooklyn, so, you know, and I think you were in Yonkers, so we weren't too far from each other. And so when you were a kid growing up, what was your aspirations? What were you hoping you'd be doing today?
It's a great question. Well, my mother and I, we started out on the Lower East Side of Manhattan on Norfolk Street. First 5 years of my life was spent there, and then we moved to Yonkers, New York. And, you know, being a kid who really didn't have many resources at my disposal. I was on welfare for the first 17 years of my life, so didn't know that there was much out there. And when I moved to Yonkers with my mother, our block became our world. Really, the confines of just a few blocks, that was everything. With the occasion of getting out to a mall or something, we didn't see a great deal. And then we reunited with my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, who lived in a nice area, and that opened up my world a bit. My grandfather was an entrepreneur, he was a photographer, and seeing the way he operated as his own boss gave me an indication that I could possibly do that one day. But I also looked at corporate America and thought that was kind of the shining star. If I could just get into corporate America, if I could get a job, because being on welfare, I was embarrassed, I was ashamed of that poverty. So my dreams and aspirations starting at that young age were really just to get a job, a good job, and make a living, and perhaps be able to help my mother out and raise a family one day, have kids. That was it, probably, at that point.
Q, it sounds like that your mother and your grandfather, big influences in your life, but you start talking about like corporate America. Were there any stories from people who had basically come from your area who were making it in corporate America at that time, who kind of looked upon to say, wow, you know what, maybe that's possible for me, or I could pave my way to getting to corporate America as well?
Yeah, I think by the time I was a teenager, a couple of the friends from Yonkers, their parents were in corporate America. One worked for IBM, I remember. One was an educator. And so we visited IBM one day. We visited her office. And I thought to myself, my goodness, she has an office. This is, wow, she must make a lot of money. And, you know, when your standard is so low, you don't really know. So that was my standard. Maybe I could one day get an office, carry a briefcase, and have one of those raincoats that I saw on TV that executives and professionals wore to work. And that was it. You know, I was limited in my dreams because I wasn't exposed to much.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That is just absolutely incredible. Thank you for sharing that. But I know exactly what you mean about seeing people dressed a certain way, and you want to feel like them, you want to be like them, and the briefcase, because I know that feeling, and I totally can relate to that. So how did you go from there? I mean, you have, you know, the background, an attorney, FBI, prosecutor. Take us a little bit closer to you going through that unbelievable journey.
Well, when I was in high school, I came to the realization that I wasn't like my friends, as much like my friends as I wanted to be. When I was younger, I noticed that I couldn't read the same way my friends were reading. It took me 4 or 5 times to read a sentence because I couldn't put words together the way my friends could. So by the time I got into high school and we were reading books, at least my peers were, I was still struggling with sentences and paragraphs. And so I never told anybody this until later in life, but I really faked it for so long because phonetically I could speak well, and I could read phonetically really well, but I didn't know what I was reading. So great ingredients for faking it. And Cliff Notes, and I never read a full book when I was in high school because it would have taken me forever to do it. And I still graduated, you know, at the top of my class. I was number 5 in my class. It happened because pure effort. I was always studying. If I wasn't at practice, I was studying. Well, my friends were just cruising through their studies at times. I was struggling a lot. And so I brought that into my college years. And when I went to college, of course, the competition is so much greater. So I didn't read a book in high school. Imagine in college where everybody is at a higher level. At Boston College, bright kids. And I was just struggling so much, but I was studying all the time. And when I wasn't practicing, I was studying. And then got grades that were good enough to get me into law school. And I didn't know what a lawyer was, but I had a mentor who was an attorney, and he's still a mentor. He's like a big brother to me. And he told me, you need to be an attorney. I didn't know what one was. So, I really didn't apply myself in that way. But when I graduated college with a degree in economics, I did enjoy that dynamic of, how the economy works. When I graduated from college, I couldn't get a job. And I interviewed with IBM, actually, and didn't get the job. I didn't know what I was doing during the interviews, but I was connected through one of my people at BC with IBM. So they gave me a shot. I wasn't ready for it. I couldn't get a job, so I took a job as a bouncer. I was a bouncer in New York, and I did that for about 2 years. And then my mentor, who's an attorney, got me a job as like a paralegal on Wall Street with a law firm. And so I did both of those things. And I was making money for the first time in my life. 2 jobs, working 7 days a week, all the time, finally making some money. And I thought this was good. I was happy. But my mentor was very disappointed in me. He said, you're not going to be bouncing for the rest of your life. You better apply to law school. So that's what I did. I applied to law school after putting it off for a year and a half. And I got in. I got into St. John's, and I got into New York Law School. And I selected St. John's. And at that point, I figured out that in order to overcome the reading issue I had, I was just going to have to make it happen during law school, because I still had a reading issue after college. And that's what happened. I actually learned how to read efficiently in law school. I could actually put sentences together the way. I still wasn't as good as my peers. They were at such a higher level. But I came out of law school with the beginnings of a new way for me. I was able to read, as a bouncer, I had the time of my life. I really didn't want to go to law school, but it's the best thing I could have done. Because it taught me how to apply whatever talent I had. It taught me how to apply it properly.
Hugh, I'm so blown away. I didn't know that part of your story. I know a lot about you, but I didn't know about the reading issue. I love how you persevered. Nobody that you talk to would ever believe that, but we're believing it now. I know you help people, you help youth, you help adults, you help everyone. And I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of people here that are probably going through those reading issues and struggling and thinking they have to figure it out on your own. Now, I love your journey. I love that you persevered. I love that you kind of like just went your own path and do that. But what would you share with someone so they didn't have to climb the mountains? You can climb any mountain you want, and we all have mountains to climb, but that's not necessarily a mountain that people should have to climb based on what we know now about reading issues. What would you tell those people who might be struggling with that area of their lives?
Well, what it did for me when I had this reading deficit, I was ashamed of it. I was really ashamed because I was hanging around with all the smart kids because I was trying to keep up with them. I knew that was my ticket to getting out of my current situation at the time. So I was hanging out with the smart kids, and these smart kids they're so brilliant. They had no reading issues. Like, reading was second nature to them. And that gave me a lot of shame because I couldn't do what they were doing. As I grew up and became an adult, well into my 30s and 40s, I started to understand that I couldn't hold on to that shame. And so I revealed it when I was 40. I just revealed my life to people when I was 40. The shame of poverty, the shame of not being able to read, all of it evaporated once I revealed my true self. I was no longer faking it. So what I would tell people is, if you have that issue, don't be ashamed. Reveal it. And if you reveal it with vulnerability, that pain that you might be feeling, I'm sure you are, it's a pain I was feeling, that pain will maybe not evaporate totally, but it will subside. Everybody on this planet has gone through challenges, struggle, and pain. Might take on a different form, but by revealing that pain, you're going to end up connecting with people who you might not ordinarily connect with, because their pain will connect with your pain. So I'd say just be vulnerable about it. And it took me 40 years to learn that, because that shame that I was carrying, that shame was impacting on every relationship I had in life. I didn't realize it, but I couldn't be my true self. Once I released it, I became my true self. I was free. And so when I speak to people and they tell me about their challenges and struggles, I say, the goal is to be free. So whatever you have to do to accept whatever challenges you have and to release them, to release that pain, that will get you to freedom. It'll get you to liberation.
Wow. There's two words on this podcast that I talk a lot about, and it's vulnerability and judgment. And the reason people don't allow themselves to be vulnerable is because of the fear of judgment. And if we could be more accepting and less judgmental, all those years in between, that you had to deal with that, you could have been free earlier. And my goal in life is to help people to find that place, to feel that freedom to be vulnerable so that they don't have to feel like they can't be themselves. You mentioned mentorship, which I think is such an important piece here, and having a mentor is unbelievable. And I think that, sometimes it's a mentorship where you're asking somebody to be your mentor, and other times it is that the person doesn't even know they're mentoring you. I just wanted to know, did the person who you say is your mentor, did you have a conversation to say, you're my mentor, or did it just naturally happen? And what about yourself to others now? How are you a mentor to others?
Well, Jay Brusman, he's the attorney. So my grandparents disowned my mother when she got pregnant with me. Really just before she got pregnant with me, she took off from the house. And then my mother's a Jewish woman, a white Jewish woman. The man who was my biological father, who's now deceased, he's a Black Antiguan Christian man. And this was at the height of the civil rights movement. So back then, it wasn't necessarily accepted that my white Jewish mother was going to have a Black kid, especially with my grandmother. But by the time I was 5 years old, my grandmother changed 180 degrees. She became the best grandmother in the world. My grandfather was always that way, was always great, but he had to live with her. So he had to go along with what she was saying. Well, I used to spend weekends with them from the time I was like 5 or 6 through my high school years. And when I was about 14 years old, I was at my grandfather's gym, the YWHA in Scarsdale, New York, and Jay belonged to that gym. And my grandfather said, I have somebody I want to introduce you to. And when he introduced me to him, it was like Jay just took me under his wing right there and started to be my big brother. It was unspoken. And he did that for all of my high school, college, law school. I mean, he got me my first legal job. He's been that way for 40 years for me. And he's taught me a great deal, because I do what he did for me. I do that for other people. It doesn't have to be spoken. It's just, this, and it's not because it was done for me. It's just because it's the right thing to do. You help people, you serve. That's why we're here, to serve.
While we're on the topic of mentors, one of Jody's guests on this wonderful program was Michael Reuter, who is actually responsible for introducing Q to myself, and we couldn't be more thankful. Q, tell us, because we can't promote this program enough, the #1 leadership program in the country in terms of colleges and universities, which includes mentoring and so much more. Tell us what attracted you to, I want to say, Michael's initial public offering to you to get involved in the program, and how you've seen it grow. And from that mentoring standpoint, why do you believe it's #1 in the country?
Mike is the reason why it's #1, and he's taught the school how to do it. So Mike, I don't know, it might be 15 years ago, when I just felt called to connect with the university. And I didn't know which university, but I looked up all the universities that had a sports management program, and I just wanted to help because I had some experience in sports, wanted to help some students. So I just got a list of 200 of them or whatever, and I just started calling. And I left a message with the dean of Seton Hall University. Now, a lot of schools, they wouldn't even take my call. They wouldn't take my call. They wouldn't call me back. I spoke to a few people and they were like, we're really not interested. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to help some kids. There was no quid pro quo. So I leave a message for the dean with the dean, and she passes it on to Mike. Mike calls me back and we have a conversation. And then Mike says, well, we'd like to discuss this more. And that led to being a member of this leadership committee, the council. And I'm so thankful that I wanted to be a part of a university because it connected me with Michael and all the great people there, including you, Scott. And so that's how it started. It started because I just wanted to do something, and I started calling around. Thankfully, Mike was open to it.
I hope everybody's listening to this, because every single word that comes out of you, Q, is about perseverance. You know how many people would have just called a few schools and would have just been like, okay, this is the wrong approach, the wrong idea, whatever's in my heart. It's okay, I'm getting rejected here, rejected there. It just seems like with everything you do in your life, while it's great to have that light bulb that's there and that easy path, and I'm sure that there have been some things that have been easy for you to obtain, it seems like just that hard work, that grit, that determination is just part of your moral fiber that just, it's contagious. And talking with the students, I'll never forget when Michael invited me to join the council. You were already on the council. And he's going down the list, and all of a sudden he just pauses. He goes, I got to tell you about this guy, Q. And I was like, I can't wait to meet him after he talked about you and everything. But I'm, you know what? It's so refreshing. And I think knowing full well challenges that are in the world today is that everyone who's listening to this program could absolutely benefit from, and we all have it deep down inside, that grit to determination. You mentioned pain before, is that I'm a true believer that, we all have different thresholds for pain, but when we experience enough pain in our lives, we will make a change. So, the students, myself, Michael, who's again, no longer with the program, but is definitely there in spirit with us. We're just so thankful to have you a part of that. And just knowing full well, that's how we met. Just totally thankful.
And it's all in the family, because Scott and Michael were on a podcast as well, Q. So we're keeping everything in the family with Seton Hall here.
Yes, well, Michael is a special person. Yes, he was the director, and now he's, he retired. He took a role as kind of a supportive link whenever they need him. But I'm glad that he's enjoying some time to himself, because he really did put a lot of work into what he was doing, and it was done all out of love. And the impact that he had on so many people, including me, was phenomenal.
He does everything with heart, and I just met him, and I got to tell you, I can tell that from the first day. So anybody who's listening, he has a 3-minute leadership blog that he does every week. So please go check that out, because it's so important. A little piece of Michael every Sunday morning at around 5 a.m. comes through. So Q, if you don't mind, I want to go back for a minute. So, I know that the listeners may be interested in hearing a little bit about, FBI agent, obviously, right? Prosecutor, and sports. So it's all kind of rolled into one. So I just wanted to touch on that, because I feel like you have such an interesting background, and I can only imagine lessons learned from each part of going through the different things that you've done. Could you share a little bit of what you've learned and why did you take that route?
So when I was in law school, I just wanted to be an entertainment attorney. But one day I was in the career placement office, and there was something about the FBI there. It was like a pre-application. And I looked at the qualifications and I said, man, I actually fit these qualifications. But when you come from a place like I've come from, law enforcement isn't necessarily what you want to do. And so, because back then, in those days, especially during the height of the crack epidemic, law enforcement was coming to get us. So I didn't necessarily want to do that. But because it was so appealing, I started to think about, okay, well, I might not agree with everything that law enforcement is doing, but I respect what they're trying to do. And I want to be on the inside to figure out how I could possibly change the culture and system. And so that's why I joined. I joined because I wanted to learn from the inside out what the system was about, so that ultimately I could participate in perhaps making it better. And so I did that. I was recruited by the FBI, and I was in for 4 years. I was undercover for 2.5 of those years on a major international money laundering, drug, and political corruption case. So I spent a lot of time on that. But I also did the other things, the bank robberies and the hijackings and the kidnappings. And it was great. I had the time of my life. And then at one point, the U.S. attorney asked me if I would consider practicing law again. And I told him, I said, again, I never really practiced. I practiced law for like 6 months between law school graduation and the FBI. And so I said, I never really practiced, so I don't know what you're talking about again, and let alone try cases, and never. So I said, are you sure you got the right guy? And he said, yeah, I just like for you to join us. And that's a job, the U.S. Attorney's Office as an assistant, that's a job that is just, it was perhaps the best job I ever had. It was incredible. But I only did it for a year because I was then being recruited by the sports industry. The NFL recruited me. And so I left after a year, and they told me I could come back if I didn't like sports. And I ended up liking what I was doing with the NFL. So I did that for 2 years, and then was recruited by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I did that for 3, and then was recruited by the NBA. And I helped with the startup of the now G League, was the D League, which is the minor league of the NBA. And I worked out of Charleston, South Carolina, and I ran the team, the minor league team there. All I can say is, when you put energy out, that energy comes back. And I started to put energy out that I could do more than I ever dreamed I could do. I started to believe in myself. Law school gave me that confidence, because again, all of my insecurities were tied to my lack of my reading deficit. And once I was able to conquer that, I started to have more confidence in myself, self-esteem, and I started to believe that I could be more than I thought I could be. And this stuff just started happening.
Incredible. Just right, Scott, this is just an incredible story. I feel like I want to take on the world right now and do a million different things. You are such an inspiration with all that and thank you for sharing and being so open with all that you have been through, because there are so many people out there right now, especially right now during the virus and everything, that are feeling like they can't do it. Not another day, not another Zoom, and they don't know how to get to the other side. And thank you for sharing that inspiration. And then you moved on to dedication to community, D2C, and what I've been seeing and reading. I'm so excited we're going to have this conversation with you now. Please share about what you're doing and how you started dedication to community.
Sure. Well, it must be noted that you never truly make it. There's always going to be challenges and struggles. So the acceptance of the journey is really the best part of life. That you accept that there are going to be challenges and struggles. There are going to be sacrifices. There are going to be wins too, but the acceptance of it. So a friend of mine who's a coach, former coach, he steps into my office one day when I was with the Jaguars, and now he's a football coach, and he says to me, "Hugh, I just want you to know something. In sports, you are nobody until somebody fires you." Now, this was coming out of the blue for me. I didn't know what he was talking about. I was like, I'm in the middle of I'm going to be a general manager of a football team soon. I want to be an owner. What are you talking about? He left it at that. Well, I go on to work for the NBA, and 2 years later, they fire me. And so the wake-up call from being fired for the first time in my life, after all the struggles in my life, to get to this point where I think I'm just about where I want to be and gonna make it. We plan, God giggles. He giggles like crazy as we plan, because I planned my life out and I get to this point and I get fired. And I'm like, wow, what am I gonna do now? I'm a corporate America was where I wanted to be. So because of that firing, I just started up my own businesses. I just went for it. I just started up a law firm. I started up a media company, and I started up a consultancy. And then a few years later, after I'm in the entrepreneurial space, I'm doing what I'm doing, I felt like something was missing. And so our family formed Dedication to Community, which is a not-for-profit organization. It's a 501c3 that was founded to empower society through education in a few different areas: public safety and diversity, belonging, equity, and upward economic mobility, all under the umbrella of justice. How do we bring justice to society? Through education. And so that's what we do at D2C. We call it D2C. And we spend a lot of our time educating and training law enforcement under the Public Safety Initiative. It's to talk about, when I talk about what I may have been thinking when I was a 12-year-old, what my life would be like, I never imagined it would be this. I never imagined. My friends are getting eaten by the streets and put in prison, and I'm gonna be teaching law enforcement in another 40 years? Never did I think that. But again, we plan, God giggles. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm spending a lot of time with D2C. Of course, I have all these entrepreneurial interests. I work a lot, but D2C is my call.
That's amazing. There's a great line that says, "There is no failure, only feedback." And it seemed like it was through that getting fired that awakened you to entrepreneurship and nonprofits and all this stuff that, I mean, I'm going to ask, was it while you were at the NBA before that, where, like, I have to think that something was brewing that was telling you, you know what, this is great. And yes, NFL is reputable and the NBA is reputable. These are great organizations, but there's something even bigger and deeper that's calling me, that all these other experiences are preparing me for. When did that start to percolate? Again, I know the writing was on the wall when you got fired, but how long had it been percolating for?
I started to feel like I was not empowered when I got into quote unquote corporate America. I didn't really feel, I really enjoyed the time with the NFL and the Jaguars and the NBA. But by the time I got to the Jaguars, I started to feel as though I wasn't in control of my life. And it's because we were working 80 hours a week. We're chasing after wins on the field. And I'm starting to think to myself, is that platform being utilized by me the way it could be to serve people? And it probably was being utilized, but not the way I thought it should be. I wasn't empowered. I wasn't in control. At any day, they could come and say, we don't need you anymore. So that was the awakening, I think. And then getting fired was like the accelerator for me, because ultimately I was going to be doing this. But when you're fired, it's a wake-up call. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. And on top of it all, I was trying to get back into corporate America. I mean, there were law firms that were recruiting me to run a sports practice. And I didn't go with it because I felt like I would just come in and they would steal my contacts, basically. And then I'd be out after a year or two. So I was chasing after something that wasn't going to empower me there. So the writing was on the wall, as you said, Scott. I had to do nothing other than start my own stuff. And that's what I did. And I'm so thankful that I did it through very, very trying times. I'm thankful I did it because I'm empowered now. I control my schedule. I control what I do. I control who I work with. It's exactly what I wanted in life.
Well, Q, I know you know this already, but the Jaguars are still chasing wins big time. So they do miss you. They do miss you, that's for sure.
Well, here's a funny part about all of that. We work with all of them. Yeah. D2C works with all of these. Although I had that experience of being fired, it didn't mean I had to burn a bridge. They had a legitimate reason for firing me and another 4 presidents. They were moving their league to another region. So the NBA, I've been working with them for quite some time. The NFL, same thing, and the Jaguars, we're looking to do stuff with them where we've been in discussions. So all of those relationships are still in my life. And that's what's I think so extraordinary about the relationships that you have will determine your destiny. And those relationships in many ways have determined my destiny. Love it.
Love it. Never burn a bridge. Powerful message. No matter what happens, you can always take the high road. I love it. Love it.
100%. 100%. Yeah, Q, I want to go back to something too that I mentioned in the opening, which I got to watch a video of you the other day kind of share this. It was the reason you wrote the book, How Not to Get Killed by the Police, and you had said that you did it for your son. You wrote it for your son. How old is your son now?
My son's 8. He'll be 9 in August. Yes.
Wow. Incredible. So, writing a book like that for your son, obviously he's still young to read the book, but why did you write the book exactly?
Well, I wrote the book because I'm on a chase to save my son's life, and my daughter too. I have a daughter who's 18 months younger. So these are they are the apples of my eye. And so I want everything for them that I didn't have. I want them to learn from my experiences and have their own great experiences through challenges and struggle. But I want them to be safe. And I think that's the main thing. We all want our loved ones and society to be safe. Without safety, there is no thriving. Without surviving, there is no thriving. So I wrote this book as an essay to my son so that he could understand how to build relationships. And I used as a foundation the relationship between law enforcement and community, because that's probably the most tense relationship in society and has been for decades. So I wrote this book giving my experiences, and it's a 31-page book. It's really some people call it a pamphlet. It's bigger than a pamphlet, but it's a 31-page book that has 4 of my stories about how I've interacted with law enforcement under some challenging conditions, and how I made it home safely, and the do's and don'ts of engaging with law enforcement. And my intention was to present this to my son when he turned 8, and then have a discussion about it with him, and so that he could understand how to build relationships, not just law enforcement relationships. But then when he turned 8, I said, you know what? He's still innocent. I'm holding on to that innocence for as long as I can. He has the book and he started reading it already, but I'm trying to hold on to that innocence. He's going to turn 9. I'll probably sit down and he and my daughter and I will have that discussion about law enforcement. But they've been brought up with an air of respect for law enforcement. From the time they were 2, they were taught to go up to law enforcement and say, thank you for your service. And when they do it, they look law enforcement in the eye. They say, thank you for your service. And what you see, the response from police officers, I mean, they get choked up. They don't, because nobody says thank you to them, and so when 2-year-olds are doing that, it's really touching. And now that they're 7 and 8 going on 9, they do it unsolicitedly. And I don't even have to coach because they've been taught this way. So they have respect for law enforcement. They understand how to interact. We're going to have that discussion, but they've gotten a head start in many ways, in a very positive way.
Q, is that part of the bigger message? I know Jody wants to get into this too with regards to social justice, social injustice, the communication, the respect. Is this at the root, I mean, I really want to, we really, I mean, Jody and I talked about this the other day, and we really want to dive into this with you. We are two people who are there and realizing that, you know, we treat people with respect, and but there's so much more that we can learn and that all of us can learn. What's at the very root of this learning, would you say, where we are now in March 2021?
The foundation for human existence is the interdependence between us all, relationships. That's at the very foundation of who we are, which is why at this time during the pandemic, it's been very challenging for a lot of people. Relationships, as I said, relationships will determine your destiny. They've determined my destiny. Jay Brusman, I have a laundry list of people who, through their relationships with me, have determined my destiny. And so that's what I believe is at the root of everything. How do we create substantive, successful, and sustainable relationships in life? And we teach this to law enforcement officers. So we teach this to everybody, corporations, not-for-profits, academia, but in particular, law enforcement officers, perhaps the most raw, the most challenged audience you could be in front of, because they've seen it all. And they will tell you in a second if you're terrible. So we teach them how to form relationships. We teach them through simple steps, listening beautifully. That's the first step in any relationship, is that you are in a position where you can listen. So listen beautifully. Don't wait to speak. Listening beautifully, learning to understand a person's heart, their mind, their soul, and then acknowledging why we're here. Like, how did we get to this place? That means we have to examine history. So let's examine history with facts for the truthfulness of history. It doesn't mean acknowledgement means we have to have certain segments of society apologizing for the history, but we do have to acknowledge that it existed, because that tells us why we're here. And then before we get to that place of trust with our relationships, there's one big piece that we have to take and one big piece we have to do. And that big piece is we have to take action. This is what everybody who is protesting now about our justice issues are protesting for. Action that will get us to this place of trust, healing, and reconciliation, this place of better relationships, harmony, connectedness, togetherness. But what is the action? It seems so complicated for a lot of us. I can tell you, it's really simple, but it ain't easy, because you have to do this stuff all the time. So it's complex, but not complicated. And that action is with open-mindedness and humility. We have to come to the table with open-mindedness and humility, no egos. We have to erect our 5 pillars. These 5 pillars are vulnerability, courage, purpose, power, and pain. This is the meat of any relationship that is substantive, successful, and sustainable. Vulnerability, courage, purpose, power, and pain. And the application of those 5 pillars to a relationship with one person or a million people. And we talked about vulnerability, getting people to hear our stories, because we are agreeing to release those stories to people. I'll just tell you quickly, when I was 40 years old, like I said, that's when I decided I was going to be vulnerable. It wasn't going to be a weakness anymore. It was going to be a strength. And I decided the way I was going to be vulnerable is I was just going to get this burden off my shoulders and release all this pain I had, this shame of poverty, and the release that I couldn't read well. And I started to tell my story to people, one-on-one, like we're telling it now, to groups. Then I started to tell it to large groups. And my law school asked me if I would tell my story to a group of 300 one day. And there was 300 prospective law students, best law students in New York State. And they were there because we were recruiting them. And after I was done, one of the students, she was a college student getting ready to go to law school. She walked up to me. She was a young Latina woman. And she said, "Mr. Williams, your story is my story." I said, what are you talking about? She said, "Your story. That's what I'm living right now." I said, "Well, what?" She said, "My family's on welfare. I've been embarrassed for my entire life to the poverty that my family has been living with. And I'm a 4.0 student," she said. "I can go to any law school in the nation on full scholarship, but I live with this shame of my family's poverty. And so I'm not able to be myself until today."
Wow.
He said, "Until today, because you just gave me permission to tell my story. And now I'm free."
Wow. Q, so what I love about this, and I'm actually getting a little emotional over here because
same, by the way,
things are being like brought to the surface. And I mean, you know me well enough, and I'm there, and I try to respect, but I also realize is that I need to learn more. I think we all need to learn more. It was months ago is that after George Floyd was killed, and so much attention, I felt like I was in that place of like, okay, you've always had my attention, but you really have my attention now. And I made a commitment. Then there was a story locally here in Verona, New Jersey, that there was a Black man who talked about going to the drugstore, going to the supermarket. Everywhere he went, he felt like he was a threat. And while living with a disability, yeah, I get looked upon a different way, but I've never felt like I was a threat somewhere. And it was like almost at that moment, I know we all have moments, and this is, I think, what you're talking about, getting to know people's stories, having those conversations, having that respect. But when I put the white flag up and I said, you know what, heck with this, like, you know, I am human beings with everyone, but I guess my question is, how do I keep this momentum? Because I was there and I was like, I'm doing this and I'm reading this, I'm getting onto like different websites and I'm learning more. But like anything, and I hate to put it, but I'm being honest with you, is that it seems like that's no longer one of the top priorities until something happens again. And then I make it a priority. And I don't want it to be that way. And I think there are a lot of people who are listening to this who are the same way. And so I'm asking you, maybe I'm asking, okay, Q, if you were the white guy right now, and with everything that you know, and I know that you grew up with a white Jewish mother, and there's a part of you that's white, is that what would be your suggestion? It's not only going to help me, but it's going to help so many people listening to this right now.
So you have done it already. So the connection between us is that vulnerability and pain. I would suggest that releasing your pain will get an unsolicited release of pain from others. So when I talk about that young Latina woman, I made the conscious decision to be vulnerable. I revealed the pain I had gone through in my life. She immediately unsolicitedly connected with it because she was feeling the same kind of pain. Mm-hmm. And so the connection that we're going to have to nurture is that pain. And so your understanding, your desire to understand somebody else's pain, if you release your pain, they'll connect with you. You will in turn be deeper in connection with them. And I think that's the answer long term, so that it just doesn't become cyclical. It becomes sustainable because you can see yourself in that person who's a little bit different, who might have different experiences. So when I look at you and you have different abilities, Scott, I can see myself in you because I've heard your pain. So I've connected with you in a way that if I hadn't been open, I might have said, well, here's a guy who's had different experiences than me. He might not understand my pain. I might not understand his. But because I walked into that party with humility and open-mindedness, I was listening to your pain in a different way, and it connected me to you. When I'm connected to you, now it's sustainable. It doesn't end. It doesn't cycle out. So you're already doing. Continue to do that. Connect through the pain of others. And pain is not a bad thing. It's really, you said, you had a quote before, failure is just an opportunity to learn. And so connect with that pain. Continue to connect with the pain of others. You're going to get 2 times more back because they're going to connect to your pain.
Q, that's so powerful, because sometimes, and again, very important, we get caught up in race, we get caught up in gender, we get caught up in religion, we get caught up in politics, and that's how we divide ourselves. But then when we come together as human beings, is that what is one of those most powerful transformational things we share is all experience pain. Mm-hmm. And in sharing that with the vulnerability, like it's amazing. And I feel so many people, rather than separating themselves through these other paths and saying, well, I got to learn more about this, but connecting initially, then on that pain level and being vulnerable to listening, but also sharing your pain, that'll help us to get to that other information that we need to be better people, to do better.
I just wanted to bring up something, because I think vulnerability seems to keep coming back to the table of being the common denominator throughout this, not just this conversation, but many others. But I think the other thing too, Q, is that some people are not having the conversation because they don't know how, because there are things, people don't know the correct words to use. They don't know, everybody's a little bit touchy right now, right, about the way you speak. And we make mistakes. I make mistakes. My kids are teaching me. They're 22 and 19, and they'll tell me, nope, you didn't say that right, or no, that's not politically correct. So a lot of times, and maybe it's just our generation, I have no idea, we don't have the conversations because we don't want to get it wrong. And so it's like, where do we go for the glossary and, of almost information so that we don't get it wrong? And I don't think there is one. I think it comes to what you said about just coming together and sharing the vulnerability. But what do you have to say to those people who may not be saying anything because they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing?
It's a good question. And it's our reality is that we're not having conversations that will lead to action because folks are worried about participating in those conversations in the wrong way. Am I saying the right? Do I call them African American, Black? What do I like? Verbiage becomes very important, and words are very important. But here's what's really the most important thing: is that as long as you're genuine and you're open-minded and you're humble, you come to the table with that humility. As long as you have that genuineness, you won't be judged. So I really don't know what is proper or appropriate. I want to have the conversation because I want to help and I want us to take action that'll make us all better. My experience isn't the same experience you've gone through. So I ask humbly that you help me with this. And that's the way I feel about when I talk to females, and to understand the journey of women and the challenges that women have. I'm going to be your biggest advocate, but I'm never going to feel the pain that you felt the way you felt it because you're living a different experience. So I want to get as close to it as possible. So help me. I'm open. So help me to learn. That kind of conversation right there is the beginning of something special. Because when people know that you genuinely care, they'll open their hearts to you, even if you get it wrong a few times, because we all make mistakes. I've said some bad things, not because I intended to say some bad things, but because those things that I intended innocently were received the way they should have been received. So I learned from that, but it wasn't held against me because the folks on the receiving end understood that I'm genuinely, I'm in their corner. I'm one of them.
I love that. I almost feel like there should be a microphone and we should just, like it should. Everything that you say, and it's, yeah, it takes some time and it's a process, but it's not rocket science. And any time that we are vulnerable is that we're unveiling part of ourselves and we're not going to get it right. We're going to make mistakes. Own those mistakes and let's continue the conversation. Knowing again that this is wonderful. This is beautiful.
It really is. And so, you know, talking about how you're bringing the community together with law enforcement, what are you seeing when that happens? What are some of the struggles? I mean, we know some of them, but anything that you can share, and how have you seen, is there anything you could share about a story of where you've seen such great commitment to making sure that the conversation in a certain area has just gone from being maybe not the way it should be to where it is now, where it's working really well? Kind of a little bit about the journey of how you've made that happen.
Well, our teaching style, our delivery is all through story. So we engage with folks because, and that's the vulnerability of it all. I leave nothing on the table. I am who you see, and I reveal myself in those venues. And so we see a transformation in hours that just doesn't ordinarily happen with law enforcement, because they come into these sessions that we have with their arms folded, thinking they're going to be thrown under a bus because of the narratives out there. Instead, they're led on this journey of introspection in a way that's non-threatening, knowing that we are their supporters. We love them because we are them. So we're giving them, God bless you, we're giving them our love. And that is what they feel. So as some brilliant people once said, it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel that leaves them with the tools, the learnings. Well, that's what it is. They feel inspired because we teach them how to form relationships with these simple tools, but they know when they leave that it was done out of love. And so that's been our key. And we do this with law enforcement and community in the same room. So there's some levels of vulnerability that are revealed in those rooms. Tears are, I mean, it's incredible. And I think this is one of the answers. It's one of the solutions. And like I said, it's simple, but it ain't easy because you have to work on relationships every day. It's not, you don't just establish trust overnight. But if people have a strategy for getting there, they'll get there. They will. Most people will get there, the vast majority of
them. You know, you bringing them to the table, I think it was brilliant, the idea, because you have the law enforcement background and you're able to bring them into a room and speak from experience and also speak from what you saw as a child. And that vulnerability. So you cover from one end of the spectrum to the other. And so there's so much relatability then, right? For the people that are in the room, whether they're the community person or the person who's on the law enforcement side. Incredible.
Those pillars that he talks about, that's his life. Yep. And like everyone else can plug into those pillars, but you talk about being vulnerable, like he's plugging in his life, which is absolutely grasping. I don't care if you're a police officer or someone who hates the police officer who's on the other side, they'll be able to connect with that. Wonderful, wonderful.
We were in a session with some faith-based folks who came to this law enforcement session at the Connecticut State Police. We trained the whole Connecticut State Police at the end of 2020. And some pastors were in one of our sessions. And at the end of it, it was only a 4-hour session. Their mouths were agape because they just heard these state troopers revealing themselves and revealing their fears and revealing that they're human beings, the humanness of them. And the pastors left saying, I never knew that they felt this way, it humanized the state troopers in the eyes of these community leaders. So now these community leaders, they leave feeling this difference and then digesting it. Now they tell those who are their members and followers and those who are being influenced by them about their experience. And this is what changes culture. When you can reveal yourself with vulnerability as a strength and express that pain, it changes the dynamic between people. And that's what we do. And we do it in very simple ways. And it's not just me. We have a full faculty of people who are trained, and they are open, and they've revealed themselves. Every time they're in front of an audience, they reveal themselves.
So you're traveling all the time. Is your team traveling all the time to different communities at this point, even during COVID?
Yeah, we've been 90% of what we're doing is live in person. 10% is virtual, but in law enforcement circles, they really want it live. They like to look at you in your eyes and in person. And so, and it's most effective when you do that. But with social distancing and protocols in place, we're able to do it, and it's worked out very well.
That's awesome. Amazing. And thank you so much. I'm just so happy that you were able to share all of that. Now, you are so focused and so driven and have had such an incredible career and so much more that you're going to be doing. But what do you do in your downtime to connect to yourself and your family? What are some of your favorite things to do?
I used to work out a lot. Now I'm starting to work out again. So I work out a little bit. I get some sleep. I do sleep really well. That's one thing. God has blessed me with the ability to sleep. So I do sleep well. And that's important when, you're moving around a lot. And I have friends who I'm just always talking to my friends. And of course, my children are, when I can just go to any place with my children, grab ice cream, whatever, that's a big deal.
As the ice cream truck passes by, don't you love Zoom? I'm sure you can hear the. So yeah, no, that's so beautiful. Scott, did you have anything before I ask my last question that I ask every single guest?
Yeah, I want to be a part of Q's team.
Yeah.
I want to be a part of Q's team. Sign me up if you want a free agent. I know the NBA free agency deadline is today, but you know what? I want to be a part of your team, Q. So I'm going to be in touch with you.
You already are. You just didn't know it.
Just truly amazing. So Q, this is a question I ask everybody because, we want those who are listening to have a great potential learning from our interviews. And so if you knew then what you know now, and it doesn't have to be one thing, it can be top three, whatever works for you. If you knew then what you know now, what would that be?
That the journey is the most important piece of this. The one thing that I did when I was a kid was I looked at the outcome. I wanted the outcome. I wanted to get out of poverty. I wanted to get a good job. But the journey was so spectacular through the challenges, the strife, the struggle. In hindsight, that journey was invaluable. It's the reason why we are who we are. And so I would say, enjoy that journey. Just let it be. It's the way it's supposed to be. No what ifs, no, maybe I should have, no. I have no regrets. I've enjoyed the journey, and now I'm appreciative of the journey I'm on.
Love it.
It's beautiful. Just beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm just so thrilled that you could join us, and I hope you'll come back again and talk to Scott and I and give us an update on all the wonderful things that you're doing to bring communities together. And where can people find your book? Is your book available?
Sure. Yes, it is. It's self-published, and I've donated it to Dedication to Community. So all proceeds go to Dedication to Community, and you can find the book at dedicationtocommunity.org, dedicationtocommunity.org.
Wonderful. Scott, thank you so much for being my guest co-host today. I so appreciate it when you're on with me.
This was a joy. I feel like I'm in a classroom every time Q speaks. So this is great. Thank you, Jody. And thank you, Q.
Yeah, and Q, thank you for the work that you do. We truly, I know Scott and I truly thank you. The communities thank you. And please keep up doing it because we need people like you to continue on this mission. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me today, and thank you for all the work you're doing to enlighten society. And thank you also for allowing me to come on and talk about my most precious gifts, my kids and D2C and the D2C family and the heroes that we support.
Absolutely. And anytime, you are always welcome back, and stay safe. And everybody, as I always say at the end, today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what steps are you going to take today to get yourself just a little bit closer to your goal? Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye, guys. Thanks so much.